Hey, everybody, we got a special guest today, Sue Kenney. We're going to talk about all things breathing, something that we do every day. So let's do it right and let's make the most out of it. One of the key principles of my coaching is when it comes to cycling is that cycling is an efficiency sport. We're bringing all this stuff in and we got to train the body to use it as efficiently as possible, whether it's the air you breathe and how you breathe, the food you eat, the water you drink. Your body has the ability to take it up 20, 30 notches if you do it correctly. All these things, right? So cycling, the efficiency sport. Today, let's talk about breathing. And in breathing and cycling, it's fascinating. So it goes back forever. My first book on cycling, like many people's first book on cycling, was 1988. Greg LeMond. He talks about breathing in here, and he talks about in 1980 when he signed his very first professional contract. His coach, his French coach at the time, gave him a huge pamphlet. He signs his contract. The first thing that he gets is a pamphlet on breathing, not on the bike, but off the bike. When I'm working with my clients, we go through a lot of discussion of breathing on the bike, that different training intensities demand different types of breathing. So if you're just out there on a 3-hour easy ride, I want my clients only breathing in and out their nose, nasal breathing. If they're doing other work, more intense work, I want a combination of inside the nose, out the mouth. Okay. And then when you're in an all-out effort, it's just whatever you can do. What I don't talk about with my clients, and I want to start talking about my clients, is that breath work that you can do off the bike. Now, this is definitely in our culture. A lot of more people are talking about it. On your Apple Watch, on your Garmin watch, there are apps for breath work where it'll take you through some breath work exercises. There's a great New York Times bestseller book called Breathe by James Nestor. And that's this book, it's an amazing book in that you're reading this book and it's an actual page turner book about breathing. Like you have to get to the next page on breathing, right? Who thought that you could ever write such a great book and motivational book on breathing? I'll put a link down to the show notes in that. But now let's talk to Sue Kenney all about breathing. One of the figures that's, made probably the biggest splash and the impact on the science of breathing, especially in the last few years, the last decade, a gentleman by the name of Wim Hof. Sue Kenney is a Wim Hof certified breathwork teacher, which she'll explain. So Sue Kenney, I got cyclists. They want to do some breath work off the bike. Let's talk all things breathwork. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And what a great introduction. Yeah. And the Wim Hof method includes breath work, but also cold therapy and willpower, which I'm sure you know a lot about and talk a lot about. So it's like a 3-pillar idea, and it works most effectively when all 3 pillars work together. But
So who is Wim Hof?
Wim Hof, he's known as the Iceman. So he's from Holland, and he has 20 odd world records that he's broken, and they all have to do with being in the cold, often in ice. But what happened many years ago is he was being challenged all the time to do different things, and they ended up building this acrylic case kind of, and they put him inside of it and filled it up with ice, and he invited scientists to come and to check him out, like to monitor him. And they were completely fascinated with what happened because his body temperature and his skin temperature didn't change hardly at all. And this intrigued the scientists. So they started to take Wim seriously. And then there's, a lot of research projects were done, and eventually he became, taken seriously, and he developed this 3-pillar method, and that has gone out to the world, and it's become really something that people are doing all over the world. and instructors are being trained every year, like almost, I think, 500 or 600 people at a time.
And so there's a lot of YouTube videos out there. There's
Oh,
you can jump in, you can just Google Iceman and Wim Hof. And so one of the fascinating things that, he uses his breath work in order to do these amazing things. And so I think one of his world records is a marathon,
yeah.
sub-freezing temperatures, and if I'm correct, it was just over 2 hours, which is that's do you remember the time that he ran that marathon in?
I don't
Yeah,
recall,
so it was fast. It was
but
fast.
no, it was incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
because, and
No
you're right.
shirt on.
What's important too is what you're talking about is, he uses different breathing techniques for different things. Like in the practice, we learn the breathing technique. We teach the breathing technique that we do as part of our daily practice. But yeah, climbing Kilimanjaro, in 72 hours, or, doing Everest, he does different types of breathing to increase his capacity to manage that type of experience.
So before we break down like what that would look like, what is it about the breathing and his special, form of breathing that enables him to put his body under such stress?
Yeah, so with the breathing technique, what we're doing is we're actually playing with the ratio of oxygen and CO2 in the body. So we're consciously commanding our breath. One of the things that Wim taught me, and I really wish I knew this when I was a competitive rower many years ago, but one of the things he talks about is this idea that the breath controls the mind and then the mind controls the body. So once we start to build on that idea, then the breathing technique actually allows you to see how to experience how that works. And it's a really powerful technique because it's based in tumo breathing, which is not something that's new. That's been
Can you
done for
say that
probably
again?
thousands.
Say that again?
The breathing technique is based on tumo breathing.
Tumo. Can you spell
Yeah,
that?
Tummo, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
and
Okay.
monks have been doing that for a long time, and it's a breathing technique where you can actually tap into the fire in your body, the heat in your body, and then manage that, like actually increase the temperature of your body at will. So by learning this technique, you start to really develop a connection with your body and your breath. And then possibilities expand. But in particular, the Wim Hof breathing technique allows your pH level to go up, okay? Because you're playing with the ratio of oxygen and CO2, the body and the brain in particular is being triggered to work on the sympathetic nervous system and then jump back to the parasympathetic nervous system. And so you're playing with the way that your nervous system works in a way that it's practicing how to adapt to those different scenarios.
Yeah.
And
And
these
so yeah.
adaptation skills are transferable to, being on the bike.
Yeah. So that's what you're just saying is super key. I want to ask a question. Um does does he have different, and I think the answer is going to be yes, but does he have different breathing techniques for different things? And so one of the things that you mentioned was the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. And so one of the things that I learned, James Nestor's book goes into the physiology, and for a cyclist and the endurance athlete, like this is key, right? So when we're jamming it out there on the bike, we're in the sympathetic fight or flight mode. And once we get off the bike, we have to transition as fast as possible so that our body jumps into the recovery mode, into the parasympathetic system. And so a lot of recovery methods, talk about deep breathing. You get off the bike, hydrate, then deep breathe, right? Spend 8 minutes or so, just doing deep breaths. What I
Mhm.
didn't understand was, and what this was so cool was that, the sympathetic system, the nerves are associated with the top of the lung, and the parasympathetic nerves are associated with the lower lung. And that was fascinating for me because I didn't know that physiological point, but also I have always my whole life been a top lung breather. This goes back to my childhood, and I remember it very distinctly. And that I was surrounded with men that had these huge guts, like my grandfather, my uncles, right? They had these huge guts. And I'm 5 years old, and I'm like, I don't want to look like that. So I consciously, even to this day, suck in my gut. And so I'm only ever breathing with my top of my lung, right? So I'm not getting the full benefits of the full lung breaths and things like that. But back to that question. And so he has the type of breathing that enables him to do the Kilimanjaro, to do this extreme stressful situations on the body. What would his daily life be like? Okay. So what could, what would he do in his daily life? So,
The
but
Wim,
he's not going that day to do Kilimanjaro, but he's
yeah,
just in his normal life. He's going to mow the lawn and,
yeah,
all that great
yeah.
stuff. What would he do in his daily life?
So he would do the breathing practice. I'm assuming it's Wim, and Wim is, he has his own style. He's very like free form, but he would absolutely do his breathing technique, which is really, as I said, it's a technique where you have to sit down or lay down because there's always a chance that you can pass out. And basically you learn the breathing technique. What you're doing is you're breathing in a lot of oxygen, and like sort of flooding your body with oxygen with as much as possible. And then on the exhale, after you do several breaths, like 30 or 40 breaths, on the exhale, you're going to exhale all of the oxygen. And the idea is that we're going to take the body's CO2 level to a very high point. And what happens is, I don't know if you know this, Lee, but the reason that we breathe in is because we exhale CO2. So the body produces CO2 in order to trigger the brain to breathe. Okay, so if we have CO2 we're breathing out, we will breathe in. If we don't have any CO2, we won't breathe in. We'll eventually die. Okay, so I always thought that we died because we didn't breathe in, because we didn't have any oxygen, but we actually die because we don't have any CO2 to trigger the brain to breathe in.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing with this breathing technique is playing with that ratio. So then you get a lot of CO2 you have no CO2 actually, but that's what we're actually doing initially, is we have no CO2, which means that we're not breathing. So we go into a hypoxic state, which is a state we don't really want to be in, but because we're controlling this. Okay, we're making a conscious choice. We're very aware of what we're doing. We're making this conscious choice not to breathe. We're going to hold our breath with no oxygen in the lungs. Well, I should correct that, because there's always some oxygen in the lungs. They will never completely empty. And so, we have no oxygen, we're holding our breath, and then the CO2 is produced, and the brain says, we've got to breathe. This person, needs to breathe or they're going to die. And what we do is we challenge that. We actively say, no, I'm not going to breathe. I want to go into this highly fight or flight state. And so that my body then starts to change physiologically and starts to respond to this fight or flight state. And so remember that this is like a practice, so that when we're in a fight or flight state in life, or after a race or during a race rather, that we can adapt to this. So we get into this big fight or flight state, and we consciously choose when we're going to take a breath in. And when we take that big breath in, then the body goes back into rest and digest, into the parasympathetic state, and it adjusts to that. So the breathing technique is moving from the sympathetic nervous system back into the parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system back into the parasympathetic. So this practice idea. Now, what happens when we're in that sympathetic nervous system and the body is saying, and the brain is saying, come on, we got to breathe, then the levels of cortisol and adrenaline really increase. They go way up. And this creates a physiological change. And part of that change is that the pH level, like the acidity in your body, the pH level will go up. And what that means is that you have an alkaline system. So the acidity goes down, the pH goes up, which means that when we're in a really good healing state, we need to have a higher pH. We have to be more alkaline. So the breathing technique actually puts us into this more alkaline state, which means that if there's something in our body, something in our system that needs to heal, whether it's a pulled muscle or a tight muscle, or I don't know, like I'm just throwing things out, but if it's something that needs to heal, now you're in a healing state where the body can more easily repair or heal what it is that needs to be done. So that's like one of the really great benefits. So if you're, for example, with your athletes, if they're, wanting to go out and do a workout, but they don't feel up to par, they feel like something's coming on, maybe they're getting sick, they don't know what it is. If they were to, sit down or lay down and do, a few rounds of the breathing, then they would actually be putting themselves into a healing state, and it might help with their workout.
All the science. And so, this is something I've never done a deep dive on Wim Hof, and I've never done a deep dive into off the bike breath work, when to put it in your day. I have done a lot of thought about, just nasal breathing through the day. I guess like 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago now, I realized that, if I was in the grocery store, I was, breathing in and out my mouth. And then, you go through the research and everything, and then that's not an optimal way to breathe because of the oxygen CO2 ratio and how everything works better through the nose and that light of intensity of work like grocery shopping. And so then I started nose breathing, just nasal breathing all day. And even to remind myself, they're right here, actually. I even got some breathe right strips, I don't think they work, but it reminded me to breathe in and out my nose. So it served as I put that on my nose in my house all day, not while I'm on the bike, not while I'm working out, but simply to remind myself to breathe in and out my nose. And then there's some workouts that we do that they're called zone 2 workouts, endurance workouts. They're when you're doing if you're doing these on a bike, you should easily be able to have a conversation with the person next to you. And then what I started to do is just put a bandana over my mouth to make sure that I was breathing all that 3 hours, however long I was on the bike, just through my nose. And I'm telling you, it improved everything. It made me feel, it increased my mood. The science says that it will increase your hormone balance, your insulin response, like all this great stuff, your immunity. But, I noticed at night, no snoring. I go to sleep with my mouth closed.
Yeah.
Through my nose. I wake up with my mouth closed through my nose. And that
you can buy tape that you wear at night. Special tape to, rather than using duct tape or something that might not come off. You can use tape. But the other thing a lot of people don't know when I'm teaching about breath work is this idea that if we breathe through our nose, then our nose produces what's called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is so important because nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So what happens is the cells can take in more oxygen if we have produced nitric oxide. So if you're on the bike training, and as you said, you have them breathe through their nose in and out, and sometimes in their nose, out their mouth or whatever. But if you're taking in more oxygen, then you're going to be more efficient. And you mentioned that in the opening about efficiency and how important that is. And it's basically how I live my life. I always say to people, I'm basically a lazy person. Um, and they look at me and go, what? Like, nothing
That's
new.
very funny because Sue, I first met you back in 2010. So we've
Yes,
been friends for a long time. And I saw you, I met you on a trail in Spain in Europe, and you were hiking 500 miles by yourself. That's
exactly.
funny. That's your
Yeah.
definition of a lazy person.
Right. But the thing is, I'm lazy in the sense if I can find something that is extremely efficient and will get me to a place I want to be in my life, whether it's physiologically, mentally, spiritually, whatever, then I will practice. I will do the practice. And with this breath work, when I started breathing through my nose, I noticed right away that, first of all, I was taking in more oxygen. I was taking in more breath in general. Plus, my nose wasn't clogged up. At first, I couldn't do it because my nose was clogged up all the time. And the other thing is that, you know, it was so funny during the pandemic that, nobody talked about the fact that nitric oxide actually is an antibacterial and an what's the other one? Antibacterial. And anyway, so what happens is if you breathe through your nose, you're going to actually, help yourself to stay more healthy. This is really important. Antiviral. That's what I was thinking. So it's an antibacterial and antiviral. So during the pandemic, I just kept telling everyone I know, everyone I talk to, just breathe through your nose, like at least add that to your daily practice so that you can stay healthier. So again, if you're an athlete and you want to be in top shape all the time, then breathing through your nose is going to contribute to that. And it's something, as you say, you can do anytime during the day, or you can do it at night. Get the mouth tape if you're breathing through your mouth at night and you can't stop yourself.
When your body is properly oxygenated through sleep process for that entire night,
Oh
you
yeah.
wake up feeling radically different than someone who has, major issues with breathing where they're choking and their brain is sending cortisol to wake up, right? Because you're not
Yeah.
getting enough oxygen. And so those people, and even myself, because I was, in 2007, 2008, I was the worst case scenario that you could possibly imagine. And now at age 51, I'm doing all these very simple things in the interim that lead to big gains in the future. And I feel amazing. And the oxygen through the nose, the nasal breathing is something that you can immediately understand. You're just
Yeah.
feeling better. You have better mood, better energy. So I love all that discussion. And so how would you, and so there's different types of breathing. I mean, there's definitely the Wim Hof method and the methods that he discusses, but breathing goes back in our civilization thousands of years. It's been crucial parts of many cultures going back for a long time. So if you were going to, when you talk to someone that come to you because you're a breathwork coach, you lead people through breathwork exercises and things like that. How do you think about their day? Like, what types of breathing do you want to do when you wake up? What do you want to do in the middle of the day? What do you want to do when you go to bed? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think ideally you want to have a breathing practice. So my choice for breathing is for my practice is the Wim Hof method.
Hmm.
So I do it basically every day. And most of the time I do it either before I go to sleep or when I wake up in the morning, even before I get out of bed, because it's kind of interesting that for me, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you want to do is go have a pee, right? But if I do my breathing, I don't have to get out of bed. And then I am in command of my whole body. So I don't have to get up and rush to the bathroom,
Hmm.
which is really interesting, I think. So I would strongly recommend a daily breathing practice. And then just as we talked about, and if I could actually, before I leave that, if I could just go back to one other benefit
Yeah.
of the Wim Hof breath work for your athletes. Because like way back when I was 40, I started the sport of rowing. And I did it sort of recreationally, and then I ended up becoming, competitive as a masters rower. When I was 45, I went to the World Masters Rowing Championships and competed with a group of 7 other women and a coxswain, and we ended up winning a gold medal. The average age of our boat was 43, which was really old at the time. This is 2001, and 43 was an older group, but we ended up winning a gold medal. So I have trained at an elite level. If I knew this when I was training, I could have shortcutted a few things. But let me tell you what the Wim Hof Method breathing does, is it goes right into tapping into your mitochondria. And as you know, the mitochondria is the energy center of every single cell.
You need it.
If you can practice and train your mitochondria, then you're going into, I don't know, is there 50 million cells or something in our body, or 70 million? I can't remember right now, but you can go in and start to train the mitochondria.
And the mitochondria is 10% of your body weight.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how insane the mitochondria is. 10% of your body weight is mitochondria. That's how much mitochondria that we have in there. Yeah.
And that's how important it is, because it's going to help with the transport, the ATP transporting to energy to the cells.
Yeah.
But what happens is mitochondria is so interesting that if you're living a lazy lifestyle, which I'm sure none of your listeners are, but if you are, the mitochondria also get very lazy. If you challenge mitochondria without giving it oxygen, then it gets kind of feisty. And what it does is it starts to work harder. And that's why this particular breathing technique, because we're holding back, we're saturating the body with oxygen, and then we're not taking in any oxygen at all, the mitochondria are responding to this idea and making them stronger. For me in particular, I started the practice about 7 years ago, and I'm 67 now. And I would say I started barefooting 14 years ago. So barefooting changed my life for sure. When I layered the Wim Hof method onto that, especially the breathing method and the cold plunge, I layered that on. What I feel today is that my inner body, so my organs, the way that my body is working, I would say is almost at the level of when I was finished training for rowing, when I stopped rowing, but I was still in really good shape. I would say that I've reversed the aging process internally by 20 years. And I haven't found anything else that I could do that, like that would do that for me, that would give me that feeling and allow me to, the way that I process food is completely different now than the way it was before, because my body is ready to take in any of the nutrients. I mean, it's great to feed our body nutrients, especially when we're athletes, but if the body isn't absorbing any of the nutrients, then it's not very effective. So you want to be able to absorb the nutrients. So what happens is the overall body starts to work at an elite level. It functions at a higher level. So efficiently, it's working with all the oxygen you're giving it, it's going to use. All the CO2 you're producing, it's going to use. All the adrenaline, all the norepinephrine, all the endocannabinoids that you end up producing, they get used in the body in a very positive way. And that is even as an overall approach to life, it works for anyone, whether you're an athlete or not. But your athletes are going to want to have an advantage in every way. So what I often also say to my clients is that as we mature, because I'm always working with maturity, with our bodies maturing.
Yep.
As we mature them, we have to work a little harder to keep the muscles strong. So the thing is, when you're breathing and you have a breathing practice, now you're using the muscles, you're using your diaphragm. Okay, so your diaphragm's going to get stronger. Your diaphragm's connected to the vagus nerve. You want the vagus nerve to be working at a highly efficient level. You start to work the rib cage, right? And all of the muscles around the rib cage, pulling it out and closing it in, pulling it out and compressing it. And that in itself is going to keep you younger and stronger. And whether you're on a bike or whether you're training, doing your, training, whatever it is that you're doing, then you want those muscles to be as strong as possible. Just doing a breathing practice will keep those muscles strong.
Yeah, I think everything that you said is very well said. I'm 51 now, and I feel better now, because not only of the dedicated nasal breathing that I do, the dedicated breath work that I do while I'm on the bike, but it's all these little simple things that I've been doing for the last, 10, 12 years. That these life I don't even like to call them hacks. Like life changes, lifestyle changes that enable me to, stop thinking about lifespan, but think about my health span. And
Right.
so obviously, we're in the Western world, and, people in their 40s and 50s are already putting on lifetime prescriptions with drugs and things like that. And I'm just, it does not have to be that way. You
No.
can get off all that stuff, all these lifestyle diseases and, all that stuff. And, breath work, I believe, and breathing correctly, it's something that we do every day. And that James Nestor's book puts out a great argument that we're not doing it correctly. And then he even goes in and explores why civilization has sort of taken a turn, and we're not breathing correctly on our everyday. But like you said, the word mitochondria is something that my athletes in the endurance world is very familiar with, because, we're not trying, as cyclists, we're not trying to build big quads. We're trying to make super efficient mitochondria, right?
Right.
They're working. Let's
Yeah,
get them to work to their maximum efficiency. And
exactly.
that's a
And
concept.
what
Yeah.
and what it also gives you, like, I'm not an athlete anymore. I'm not involved in any particular sport except maybe cold water swimming. But the thing is, what I've developed all these do-it-yourself projects. Like, I'm building myself a sauna right now from scratch. And what I find is that I start working in the morning and I can work for 4 or 5 hours without really stopping, except maybe for a drink or to use the washroom or something. But and then I can keep working for hours and hours and hours. Whereas in the past, I would get tired. I'd work for a couple of hours and need a break, but now my ability, my endurance at a low level. So I'm not training as an athlete, but
Mhm.
my endurance at a low level is incredibly long, and I have a lot of energy and I sleep better. And as far as I'm concerned, all of those things are so important to have a quality life, because as athletes, during the day, yes, you want to live your life and keep, working on, developing your practice, whatever that is. But, you mentioned what else would you do in the day? A simple thing is, the yogic breathing. What you talked about at the very beginning was this idea that, when we breathe in the upper part of our chest, that's when we move into the sympathetic nervous system, because we don't have time to breathe down into our belly if we're running away from a bear, which is how it all started, right? When we were
Yep.
people. So we don't have time. So we have to breathe up high. The thing is, during the day, if you find yourself feeling a little bit stressed, all you have to do is move the breath down into the belly as low as you can. Breathe into your lungs as low as you possibly can. And then feel that breath, follow it, notice it. If we're just aware of our breath during the day, anytime during the day, that will help us, because we'll start to identify, okay, why am I always breathing in my upper chest? Or why did I stop breathing? Like, I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you've ever stopped breathing, like you stop breathing, thinking about something, or you're afraid of something and your breath stops, then it's just becoming aware of that. Once we become aware of it, then it'll intrigue, I'm sure it will intrigue people to want to learn more, to want to develop their breath work and just have a more quality of life. And it actually makes you more happy breathing. Like
Let me ask you, yeah. So I absolutely agree. It just increases like of all these things, like that we said, the use of energy, the hormonal balance, the body's alkalinity, like all these things can be enhanced through proper breathing. Now you mentioned a little bit ago, and this is kind of I don't know if there's actually a term for this. So in in um in terms of metabolism, we talk about a concept called metabolic flexibility, which is your
right.
body's ability to go from a fat burning state,
Yeah.
which is when you're just sitting on the couch or doing moving around, to a carb burning state where we're burning sugars,
Mhm.
and to make that switch and then to make that switch back. Right. So it's something that we train. We train this metabolic flexibility. Is
Mhm.
there a similar concept between the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system between that, um, you know, uh, to make that better? Is there a concept? And the reason I ask is because I know some people that have no ability to shut down their sympathetic system. Like they are always in a state of this high stress flight or fight or flight mode, and you can see and you can Google it, what happens after years of being kind of stuck in this sympathetic system. What are all the ailments that happen? And so do you know of a term where like metabolic flexibility, but in terms of the nervous system? I bet there's a term.
Yeah, I'm not specifically experienced in that, but what I do know is that, as I said earlier, this particular breathwork practice is going to play in
Yeah,
these two different
yeah,
areas. It's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
go in, produce the hormones that need to be produced, produce the anti-inflammatory proteins, produce what you need, and then change and go back to being relaxed. And then so it's this idea, like I'm a big believer in cross training. Like when I used to train to row, at that time I learned how to golf, and I would use my golf swing to practice my rowing stroke. And when I was rowing, I would use my rowing stroke to practice to think about my golf swing, because they're very similar. They're just on two different planes. But it's a similar process that you go through. And so I think the same way with this breathing method. I feel like I'm always practicing life. I'm practicing, how do I go from this state into this state? So, and the outcome of that is my ability, I mean, along with years and years and years of meditation and yoga and I've done a lot of other stuff, but it's this ability, it's added to this ability of learning to become what is called equanimous, right? Learning how to be in this state. And when something happens and you're ready to jump forward, then you can just fall back into the state. Jump forward, fall back into the state.
yeah.
So it's always efficient adaptation. And as human beings, we are blessed with the ability to adapt. And even if we mess up our breath over a lifetime
I
and we're not
agree.
breathing properly, we can always go back and learn
That's
how.
well, yeah, like the human body is so amazing. Like you're just saying, like you can really mess things up for
Yeah.
decades. And
Yes.
then by doing the right things, you can be back to your optimal self, like your superhuman self, right? And I'm a perfect living example of that, right? And so
Yeah.
that, I drank hard for 25 years, and that didn't kill me or destroy me, but I have I've not had a drink. This January will be 4 years, no alcohol
Wow.
whatsoever.
Good for you.
And, but the human body is amazing on its ability to fix itself. Like it's amazing. Like, when so I live in the mountains of Virginia. We're constantly rated as one of the most unhealthy counties in Virginia as a population. And it's amazing to me that, you know, you see like the diet of juniors, children, and, you know, going into adulthood. And even though they have those decades of poor diet, that I know, and you know, that if they wanted to flip that switch, they could become an alt, you know, their best self. Right. And that's one of the things I tell my clients all the time is like, I'm here to help you become your best self, you know?
Mhm.
And that's a great comment. But Sue, I want to, so this is what you do for your career. Okay. So you're in breath work. Talk about how you work with clients. And if someone wants to hire your services, how does that work?
Okay, so on the Wim Hof Method site, I have breathwork workshops that I do. So they're small groups, usually about 6 people. I don't like to go much bigger when I'm doing these are on Zoom. So
Okay.
that, it's basically teaching the method, how it's done, so that you can practice the science behind it. And then we actually do a practice, a breathing practice. I have had many clients that I just work with one on one. And so, in that particular situation, it's very individual. It depends on where the client is. Like,
Yeah.
where are they right now in their life? Are they an athlete, or are they, a business person who's been, sitting behind a desk for a long time
And
and and want to like change their life and
how
really
long would those Zoom be? How long would that be? Like, so
the
your
Zoom
Zoom
call
session.
it's an hour and a half.
Okay.
So there's also a guided meditation at the end, because what happens after you do this particular breathing technique, it's so interesting about how relaxed you are when you're finished. So it's a workout,
And so they're
but
sitting in their like their office chairs, like right now, like just like in their chair.
they could be sitting or lying down. You
Okay.
never do the breathwork practice while you're in water, near water, driving, operating any mechanical vehicle
So
or
someone
whatever.
could just take their laptop, set it in the bedroom, lay it down,
Yeah,
and go and then hear you and guide the group through
yeah,
an actual session that lasts about an hour and a half. Now, is that
yeah.
an hour and a half of breathing or is there introduction and
Oh, no, no. The breathing itself is about 20 minutes, the
okay.
breathing practice. And then there's probably a 10-minute guided meditation at the end. So the guided meditation is always fluid. It depends on how the group is responding. It's kind of an energetic thing, but it's usually about 10 minutes.
Good.
So
I'm
a lot
totally
of
going to do this, by the way. That's why I'm asking so many questions. I got to wrangle up five more people, and get on a Zoom call with you to go through
yeah,
this process. Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure, for sure, do it. And even if you have a couple more, it would be okay. But I just don't like to have a
yep,
really big group.
yep.
And the thing is, there's a lot of time spent talking about how the breathing practice works, how your body responds to it, so that people understand what's behind it. We live in a world, we want to know what the science is. We want to know what physiologically is happening to our bodies or our brain, and so I spend a fair bit of time, discussing that and explaining it, which I think is really important.
Yeah. Well, Sue, this was a fantastic conversation. Like I mentioned, I've known you since 2010, and you have really lived an amazing life. I've followed you. You're on Facebook. And I'll put all the places that we can find you and follow you down in the show notes.